2 hours, the presenters on every news channel were saying injured but expected to make a full recovery, and I've no idea why, but it made me so angry.
For years, Diana's family kept quiet while the endless comparisons between Meghan Markle and Princess Diana took over global headlines. Harry himself declared that how Meghan acts and who she is just so incredibly similar to his late mother. But now that long silence has apparently been shattered, and the fallout is sending massive shockwaves through royal followers across the globe, what Diana's own sister has reportedly let slip has kicked off a fierce new debate about family loyalty, the late princess's legacy, and whether certain lines were never meant to be crossed. Both fans and critics are quickly drawing battle lines, but the whole truth is still highly controversial. Did Prince Harry completely misjudge a voice he assumed would stay quiet forever? So what is your take on this? Was Diana's sister right to break her silence? Or should these deeply personal family matters stay behind closed doors? Tell us what you think down in the comments. Be sure to hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into royal drama. Whispers are growing from Diana's inner circle. For decades, one key figure stayed almost entirely out of the brutal public battles that constantly swirled around the memory of Princess Diana. As raw documentaries dropped and explosive interviews triggered controversy, and non-stop comparisons flooded news columns and loud television debates, Diana's older sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, absolutely refused to step into the media spotlight. Quite unlike almost everyone else linked to the most famous woman of the modern era, Lady Sarah built a firm reputation for keeping her distance. That quiet retreat defined her whole life. This was no temporary phase. Her silence endured through decades of royal transitions, dramatic shifts in public mood, and endless moments where anyone else would have grabbed the microphone. Which is exactly why these new reports hinting that Sarah has finally spoken up about the ongoing drama around Meghan Markle have sparked such a massive wave of global curiosity. Seasoned royal commentators instantly flagged something highly unusual. This was not some thirsty celebrity hunting for headlines, nor a random pundit tossing out opinions from the safety of the sidelines. This was a woman who knew Diana intimately long before flashbulbs blinded her, long before palace protocol altered her destiny, and way before the public turned her into a saint. The actual timing makes this even more mysterious. For ages, intense debates comparing Meghan and Princess Diana have completely dominated the media. People noticed how Meghan posed on the floor wearing that specific white button-down with her legs folded. She had to know exactly what iconic image she was bringing back to life. She would have been fully aware of what she was mirroring. Her loyal supporters regularly highlight how incredibly similar their struggles were behind those palace walls. Meanwhile, critics insist those comparisons lazily oversimplify two completely distinct lives. This painful debate has settled in as a constant backdrop to Prince Harry and Meghan's high-profile split from the family. Yet through all the chaos, Sarah stayed quiet. That refusal to speak only fueled the deep mystery. After all, when someone chooses total silence for decades, you cannot help but wonder what secrets they are actually keeping. Sometimes holding your tongue in public speaks far louder than any official press release ever could. For Sarah, each passing year of quiet retreat only proved she valued private peace over media drama. But then, in an instant, the spotlight shifted right back to her. Rumours started flying that Diana's sister was finally done sitting on the sidelines while arguments raged over Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and her late sister's memory. As things grew more intense, whether driven by deep worry, rising anger, or just a need for truth, Sarah's reported intervention completely flipped the script on this ongoing drama. Questions exploded overnight. What triggered this shift? Why now? Most crucially, what could have possibly convinced such a fiercely private woman that staying quiet was no longer an option? Palace corridors are reportedly buzzing with intense curiosity. Sarah was never one for dramatic public statements, which made this sudden development feel incredibly heavy and significant. Her deep sisterly connection to Princess Diana lends her voice a unique authority that almost nobody else alive can claim. She was never watching this play out from afar. She shared Diana's childhood long before the global press knew her face. As the wild speculation continues to spread, one stark reality is becoming impossible to ignore. When someone who spent 40 years dodging public controversy suddenly steps directly into the line of fire, you have to assume something very fundamental has changed behind closed doors. Whether that guess is true remains completely unclear, but Sarah's choice to finally break her decades of silence has added a dark, new layer to a drama already overflowing with questions, and the true fallout of this shift is likely only starting to unfold. After decades of silence, a woman long hidden from public view begins to move in the royal shadows, sparking urgent questions. What finally forced her to speak out today? What family truths have remained buried for so long, and who is about to get exposed? Stick around, we are just getting started. Bonds of family Harry never doubted. Long before toxic disputes, television interviews, and endless media headlines turned the monarchy into a global soap opera, Prince Harry shared a deep bond with a side of his family that meant everything to him. The Spencer family was not merely some part of his mother's past, they were part of his own DNA. After Princess Diana's death in 1997, those blood ties became incredibly vital to him. Walking through the darkest periods of his life, Harry leaned on the only relatives who had known Diana not as a global icon, but as a sister, a daughter, and a real human being. That mutual grief forged bonds that looked completely unbreakable. For decades, royal commentators just assumed those intimate Spencer connections remained completely untouched by the drama. The Spencers were his absolute direct link to Diana's world, and Harry clearly seemed to cherish that relationship above all else. From the outside, it made perfect sense that Diana's family would understand his pain far better than any palace courtier. After all, they carried the exact same grief. They shared the same memories. They knew the private side of Diana, the one the public never saw. And that belief might just be the pivot point in this unfolding drama. As arguments over Meghan Markle, royal life and the late princess's legacy heated up, most eyes stayed locked on the bitter rift between Harry and the crown. Yet almost nobody stopped to ask how Diana's actual family felt about all of it. For years their silence fed the rumour mill. With no official statements, the public just filled in those empty spaces. Some figured the Spencers must back Harry's moves, others guessed they shared his anger behind closed doors. But guesses aren't facts. Sometimes keeping quiet just paints a completely wrong picture. Now whispers that Lady Sarah McCorquodale might see things very differently change the whole game. Her sudden involvement brings up an awkward question that nobody wants to touch. What if the people closest to Diana don't actually see these modern dramas the same way? What if standing by Harry actually means failing Diana's memory? It is possible. That idea hits hard. It's easy to ignore internet trolls and tabloid critics, but pushback from your own flesh and blood, that hurts. They share a history and deep emotional bonds that outsiders simply cannot touch. When doubts creep in from that inner circle, the whole narrative begins to shift. It feels deeply personal, impossible to ignore, and incredibly tough to spin. Some insiders claim Harry expected automatic support from his mother's family no matter what. Others point out there's zero proof he ever took their backing for granted. This precise mystery is what keeps the entire world so completely hooked. We still don't know the real conversations that happened behind palace doors or how his relatives actually felt as the drama played out. But one thing is becoming very clear: this dynamic is more tangled than anyone first thought. If Diana's own sister is finally breaking her silence, her take has the power to completely shatter the assumptions people have held onto for years. And if those theories are wrong, Harry is facing a harsh reality. It turns out that even among the Spencers, absolute support was never a sure thing. How did someone in the inner circle mistake their quietness for approval? What shifted in private, and who was the first to doubt Harry's claims? What happens when old family loyalties get pushed to the breaking point? Let's look at the comparisons that simply won't die. Long before Lady Sarah McCorquodale's stance made headlines, one massive issue had already wrapped itself completely around this royal narrative. We aren't talking about one bad interview, a family fight, or some tense public appearance. It was the relentless comparison that has trailed Meghan Markle for years. Time after time, people ask the exact same question. Is Meghan truly living through a modern repeat of what Diana went through? You see it in headlines, TV debates, docs, and all over social media. It's the ultimate debate among royal watchers. Over the years, this has become the single most explosive talking point of Meghan's public life. The obsession makes sense. Both of these women married into the most picked-apart family on earth. Both found themselves hounded by a relentless media circus. They both dealt with an intense spotlight that went way past typical celebrity gossip. To their fans, the parallels are just undeniable. They look at Meghan through the prism of Diana's tragic past, spotting dark patterns they insist cannot be ignored. But critics see things differently. Over the years, skeptics have argued that these similarities are being majorly blown out of proportion. They point out that while some details look similar on the surface, the times, the context, and the actual situations are completely different. What feels like a deep connection is just a lazy oversimplification of two very different lives to others. The debate slowly moved away from cold, hard facts and into raw perception where finding common ground is basically impossible. And that is exactly why the whispers about Diana's sister carry so much weight. Unlike talking heads or royal experts, Sarah stands in a category completely her own. She knew her sister before the grand titles, before the stone walls, and before the suffocating fame turned her into a global icon. That deep history gives her voice a unique kind of power. Love her views or hate them, you cannot ignore her. To royal watchers, this explains why these non-stop comparisons have allegedly caused quite a stir among the Spencers. The real issue isn't even whether Meghan and Diana went through similar battles. The thornier question is if those shared struggles mean they belong in the exact same story. Similarity doesn't mean equality, but the public constantly blurs that line, and that exact confusion is the heart of the storm. Fans argue that Diana's history provides the perfect lens to understand Meghan's own journey. Skeptics fire back that constantly comparing the two only ends up watering down both of their unique, complex lives. Between those two camps lies a growing rift that remains completely unresolved. The more eyes that fixate on this comparison, the more raw and hostile it gets. Each new clash only drives the wedge deeper instead of healing old wounds. And because Diana still holds such a fierce grip on the public memory, any talk of her legacy brings a heavy, suffocating wave of emotion. Here is the real kicker: there might not actually be a single right answer. This endless debate drags on because people view the very same history through completely different eyes. But if Diana's own sister is finally bothered enough to step into this messy, public drama, it proves this fight has reached a point where staying silent feels like taking a side. That single realization is already starting to twist the entire narrative. Why does this ghost comparison between Meghan and Diana refuse to fade? And who actually gains from keeping this fire burning? What quiet, bitter feuds is it, sparking behind palace doors? Exactly how far will this bitter unease go before the whole thing shatters? Let's dig in. This is the Diana very few ever saw. Long before Princess Diana became the single most famous face on the planet, she was just little Diana to the tight-knit Spencer family. Years before rigid palace protocols, screaming headlines, and global obsessions swallowed her whole, she lived in a quiet world, shared only with those she trusted. It was a life built on simple family dinners and whispered secrets, normal routines, close bonds untouched by the toxic pressures that would eventually define her public myth. Almost nobody watched that private, raw version of Diana closer than her older sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale. That truth is exactly why Sarah's view matters so much today. Millions judged Diana through glossy photos and rehearsed interviews, But Sarah knew her long before the cameras arrived. She knew the real girl behind the screaming headlines. She loved the sister, not the saint. That difference is critical because the history books only preserve the polished, carefully edited parts of a person's life. But family memories paint a far darker, more complicated picture. Over the decades, Diana was turned into a convenient symbol for endless public arguments and causes. Fans praised her warmth. Skeptics picked apart her choices. Experts debated her legacy. But as her massive public legend grew, the quiet, fragile details of her true self were completely swallowed up. The brighter her spotlight burned, the easier it was to worship the myth instead of the actual human. But those closest to her held memories that never belonged to the public. Her family remembered quiet, messy moments that never made it into the glossy documentaries. They remembered vulnerable traits that no camera lens could ever truly capture. Diana's intense warmth, her sensitivity, and her dark humour were lived out directly with the people who shared her early life. None of this was some managed PR stunt. These were raw, everyday moments forged years before royal duties crushed her spirit. This intimate history explains why these constant comparisons feel like a direct slap in the face to her family. The public debates broad themes. The Spencers feel the physical sting. Her own siblings, on the other hand, view these headlines through a haze of heavy personal grief. They are not just analysing two glossy media icons. They are measuring a caricature against the flesh and blood sister they actually loved. For Lady Sarah, this divide carries massive emotional weight. The toxic debates over Meghan Markle and Diana's legacy drag on, but Sarah's perspective is built on decades of shared sisterhood. Her view was never built on cheap television documentaries gossip or mainstream narratives whipped up decades after Diana died. It was forged in raw, lived experience. That does not make her right, but it makes her uniquely, deeply informed. This tension builds because memory is such a deeply powerful force. It twists how we see today's drama and how we judge the ghosts of the past. What looks reasonable to the public feels like a betrayal to someone with intimate, painful knowledge. That brutal divide between the public myth and private reality breeds constant anger, especially when dealing with someone as legendary as Diana. As eyes lock onto Lady Sarah's rumoured protective reactions, this war becomes about much more than Meghan Markle. It is a battle over who owns Diana's memory and whose voice carries the ultimate authority to speak. While onlookers endlessly dissect the similarities, the differences, and the legacy, Sarah's memories bring a heavy reality that nobody can fake or argue away, a raw first-hand view of the actual woman behind the massive legend. And that painful reality is going to grow much heavier as this complicated royal drama unfolds. How much of Diana's true aching self was buried behind the image we all worshipped? What secrets has Sarah kept buried for decades, and why are they clawing their way out now? Could these family revelations shatter everything we thought we knew about her life before the crown do not go anywhere? Bitter loyalties pulled in opposite directions. As the storm around Meghan, Harry, and Diana's legacy grew more intense, this bitter conversation quickly became far bigger than any single member of the family. What started as a simple debate about media comparisons was mutating into something far more dangerous. Beneath the screaming headlines, a dark, quiet question was brewing. How were Diana's own siblings actually reacting to this chaos unfolding around them? The real truth was actually a lot more complicated than onlookers like to think. For decades, the public just assumed Diana's family spoke with one single voice. Since they all shared that deep blood bond with her people, just figured they would naturally view today's ugly controversies through the exact same lens. But families almost never agree on everything, especially when painful memories are dragged up. Time might bind a family together through shared trauma, but those passing years can also warp how each person remembers the exact same moments. That stark reality feels pretty heavy as the endless scrutiny on Harry and Meghan intensifies. Right at the centre is a painful clash between family loyalty and private truth. Standing by someone doesn't mean you have to agree with every single choice. Speaking up out of worry doesn't mean you're turning your back. But those quiet feelings get completely swallowed up in noisy public fights where everyone demands you pick a side. Behind closed doors, though, family feelings are always way messier than just picking sides. For Diana's own siblings and family, this tightrope is incredibly painful to walk. On one side you have Harry, a grieving son who watched his mother die in the worst way possible and still carries that heavy trauma today. On the other side is the untouchable memory of Diana herself, a sister whose ghost still holds a massive, aching space in their hearts. And when people start blurring those two worlds together, things get really uncomfortable very fast. This feels extra sensitive because the ongoing royal feud shows zero signs of actually fading away. Years after Harry and Meghan packed their bags and walked away, the bitter clashes are still splashing across global headlines. Every new interview, documentary, or leaked argument just throws fresh fuel onto the fire. What once looked like a temporary spat has hardened into an endless war with no real finish line, leaving a lot of onlookers feeling deeply uneasy. This isn't just about one bad interview or some clumsy comment. No, it is about the entire story being built around Diana's memory right now. As comparisons grow and rival stories spread, her family worries her ghost is being dragged into modern mud, slinging a weapon she can no longer control. But then again, some feel completely different. They honestly believe Diana's painful struggles are still incredibly relevant, and talking about them helps explain what's happening right now. That strong view is exactly why this whole debate is so deeply, bitterly split. The real tragedy is that both sides claim they are shielding her memory, but they want to shield it in completely opposite ways. Now, as whispers about Lady Sarah McCorquodale's private feelings start leaking out, the stakes are getting dangerously high. A fight that once seemed to only involve Harry. Meghan and the Crown is now dragging in a whole network of protective aunts, uncles, and conflicting family duties. The deeper you dig, the less this actually seems to be about public image. It has become a war over who actually owns Diana's story, and that messy battle gets uglier by the day. Different sides of Diana's bloodline are starting to view this crisis in completely hostile ways as private pain hits public pressure. Who is pulling strings behind closed doors? What ugly cracks will show when their loyalty is put to the test? Let us unravel the mystery of her breaking point. For years, Lady Sarah McCorquodale kept her head down, staying far away from the drama surrounding Harry, Meghan, and the memory of Princess Diana. Even as screaming headlines, explosive documentaries, and toxic social media fights took over the internet, Sarah kept herself completely out of the conversation. Her silence was absolutely solid, completely deliberate and remarkably rare in a saga where everyone always speaks. But the real mystery isn't why she stayed quiet for years. It is what finally convinced her that staying silent was no longer an option. The answer lies in slow developments that turned a quiet family dispute into a major, unavoidable crisis. It didn't blow up overnight. Instead, the heavy tension built up, slowly piling drama on top of drama until the whole conversation turned into a completely different beast. What started as a debate over Harry and Meghan leaving their royal duties slowly turned into something much heavier, dragging in Diana's memory. Her sacred legacy and the exhausting way her story keeps getting weaponized in modern online fights. One relentless theme stood out. The comparisons between Meghan and Diana just never went away. In fact, they only grew as public interest surged. Every headline and interview seemed to wake the ghost of Diana. Her fans pointed to the exact same brutal treatment by the press. But critics argued those lazy comparisons oversimplified two completely different lives, and as those bitter arguments kept clashing, the debate got incredibly toxic. For someone like Sarah, this toxic circus must have felt deeply personally painful. Unlike media pundits watching from a safe distance, Sarah held raw personal memories of her sister. To her, Diana was never some tragic brand or a cheap headline. She was a sister after all. So those endless public debates about Diana's life probably hit her differently than they did the rest of us. And all the while, The bitter friction between Harry, the royal family, and a hostile public showed no sign of slowing down. Years after, the initial split-fresh wounds kept ripping open. Instead of healing, those deep lines in the sand only grew wider. Every single headline sparked angry arguments about loyalty duty and the permanent damage caused by choices made on both sides of the palace walls. It all built up to what felt like a tipping point, not because of one big fight, but a slow, heavy pile-up of controversies. No sudden explosion, just a quiet, heavy realization that things had drifted far too close to the edge. The real issue was not just the gossip itself, but how relentlessly Diana's name kept getting dragged back into the middle of it all. People see this differently, of course. Some think Sarah stepped in because she was terrified of how her sister's memory was being exploited. Others claim she just wanted to inject some calm into a debate that had turned completely toxic. We cannot know her true thoughts, but one thing is certain: a shift happened, and it cannot be undone. A woman who stayed silent for decades is suddenly linked to a drama she always avoided. That alone tells you we are in uncharted territory now, if keeping her mouth shut was once the safest option. These scandals might have convinced Sarah that staying quiet was dangerous, a realization that could end up shaking things up more than anyone expects. Why now? What kind of quiet, crushing pressure finally broke her silence? Was it the latest wave of bad press? Those endless comparisons to Diana? Or was it something deeper behind closed doors? What happens when the dam finally breaks? Quiet whispers behind palace doors. Far away from the flashing cameras, the quiet talk about Harry, Meghan Markle, and Princess Diana's memory shifted into something deeply personal and incredibly messy. While the world outside focused on televised interviews, formal statements, and loud talking heads, tense private conversations were reportedly happening deep within the family circle, far from any public view. These were not shouting matches, but tense, quiet efforts to figure out how this ongoing feud would wreck their relationships, their names, and the throne itself. Rumour has it that Diana's family, especially Lady Sarah McCorquodale, knew all too well that keeping quiet in public did not mean staying silent behind closed doors. As the global storm around Meghan Markle and Prince Harry raged on, the pressure to take a stand grew heavy even for those who usually stayed far away from drama. Inside those rooms, they did not just worry about the headlines, they worried about how the gossip was slowly rewriting the memory of Princess Diana. Some family members reportedly worried that constantly comparing Diana to Meghan Markle was blurring lines that had always been very distinct to the family. But others felt the media circus had already grown far too massive for anyone to control, especially with the intense international spotlight shining on both of them. The real danger was that any tiny whisper from Diana's family would instantly get hijacked and turned into a massive global news story. Even the ones who wanted to stay quiet realized that their very silence was being twisted into whatever story the press wanted to tell. It was no longer just about Meghan Markle or Prince Harry, but about how Diana's name was being weaponized in their constant public battles. As the hushed meetings dragged on, they were fighting two wars, one with the media and one with each other over what to do next. This division was not an open screaming fight, but rather a cold disagreement over tone blame and who owed what to whom. But even those quiet disagreements felt massive because they were fighting over Princess Diana's memory and how the world should remember her today. To anyone watching closely, it was clear that Diana's family was no longer standing together. They were quietly fracturing from the inside out, and the longer those secrets stayed hidden behind closed doors, the more the world guessed at what they were really thinking. Yet, through it all, they remained bound by a fierce, desperate need to protect Diana's memory from the fallout. The quiet tension mounted fast. This felt less like a tabloid scandal and more like a raw family tragedy, playing out on a global stage. There were no neat answers behind those palace walls, only the heavy realization that things were spiraling completely out of control. While nothing was settled, the whispers made one thing clear: Diana's memory, Harry's fragile place in the family, and Meghan's heavy public role were colliding to tear this unresolved family tragedy wide open. Hidden away, those secret talks set off a chain reaction no one saw coming. What was really said when the cameras turned off, who pulled the strings, and what devastating consequences are already in motion that the world is completely blind to keep watching. Sarah's quiet warning changes everything. Out of nowhere, Lady Sarah McCorquodale's private thoughts started leaking out, catching supporters and critics completely off guard, and instantly shifting how everyone talks about Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the ghost of Princess Diana. This was no explosive public takedown or dramatic family feud, just a quiet, heavy reflection that turned heads purely because of who was saying it. For decades, the media and the public have fought over Diana's memory, but a sister's voice brings a completely different kind of weight. Hers is a voice shaped by real life, not gossip. And as the talk around Meghan Markle shifts, it is moving away from cheap comparisons toward deep, uncomfortable questions about legacy and identity in the royal family. There was no screaming anger here, just an unsettling lack of solid answers. It felt more like deep worry than an open fight. Insiders say Sarah seems to validate Harry's difficult path, while also quietly asking why Diana's ghost is constantly dragged into this endless public warfare. Underneath her words lay a chilling worry for Harry. Some do not see this as a family split, but rather as a desperate warning to stop before the emotional damage goes too deep. At the heart of everything lies Diana. Her memory is both a comforting sanctuary and a painful lightning rod whenever the old days are compared to the mess of the present. This is no cheap tabloid gossip. Sarah's view comes from a lifetime of shared history. That gives her words a raw emotional power that outside experts simply cannot copy or easily wave away. Naturally, the public is deeply split. Many believe her sudden intervention will completely rewrite how we talk about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry going forward. But others warn against reading too much into what might just be a carefully leaked, one-sided slice of a very private family pain. Still, the damage or the healing is done. A heavy emotional weight has crashed into an already fragile story, reminding everyone how easily close family members can reshape public memory. Now all eyes are locked on what this means for Harry. He has spent his life clinging to his mother's family and her legacy, and now rumour mills are spinning fast over how deep this rift might actually run. This sudden twist changes the entire game, bringing up brand new questions. What is Sarah actually trying to tell us here? And why is she suddenly so worried about Harry? Could Diana's memory be the key to a much darker hidden truth that is about to explode? A massive royal legacy hangs in the balance. With the situation reaching a knife edge, everyone is waiting to see the fallout of Lady Sarah McCorquodale's sudden dramatic intervention. This is no longer just a series of random family arguments. It is a full-blown crisis over Princess Diana's legacy and those highly fragile family ties. What started as online chatter has spiraled into a battle over identity and painful history. For years, the brutal narrative surrounding Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the palace has constantly swung back and forth between bitter warfare and desperate attempts at peace. Every single development adds another painful layer to this story. Diana's memory is still the absolute centre of it all. Naturally, her sister's view carries massive weight because she actually lived through the tragedy herself. As the noise around Sarah's comments grows louder, deep questions are emerging about the future. There are no easy answers here, only raw, painful emotions that refuse to fade. Some hope this intervention might finally bring peace, while others fear it will only widen the rift. Nobody knows the truth yet, but what complicates everything is the relentless focus on Diana. Her shadow hangs heavily over every single move Harry and Meghan make. To some, Diana represents pure love and survival. To others, she is a warning about the dangers of extreme fame. Because of this, her name alone triggers instant emotion. The massive public reaction to Sarah's comments has only supercharged that tension. Rather than ending the feud, it has created a whole new battleground. Both sides see what they want, while others feel a duty to protect Diana's memory. A single statement has fractured into dozens of different stories, leaving any hope of peace completely up in the air. Nothing has been settled and nothing is off the table. We are left with a void of unanswered questions, volatile feelings, and unfinished family business. Even a tiny whisper carries massive weight, whether she intended it or not. We have reached a dangerous crossroads where memory and raw human relationships collide. Sarah's sudden move does not end the argument, it drags it out, forcing us into a dark phase where the past continues to haunt the present and the future is totally up for grabs. With so much uncertainty, everyone is waiting to see what happens next behind those closed palace doors. Royal experts warn that even a minor leak could change how this story unfolds, especially with Diana's highly sensitive legacy on the line. Family drama and public opinion are now completely tangled. The coming weeks will show if these deep wounds heal or split wide open. For now, the door is wide open and every new voice memory, and fresh rumour is reshaping a narrative that is still playing out far from the public's prying eyes. What do you think? Does Diana's sister breaking her silence completely change everything we thought about Meghan and Harry? Or is this just another shocking twist in a never-ending royal drama? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to like, share and subscribe for more royal updates.